Ridge Forrester stepped into the executive's suite at Forrester Creations expecting nothing more scandalous than a last-minute fabric crisis, but instead the world tilted on its axis. In the half-lit glow of the dimmed office, Eric's distinguished silhouette was pressed tightly against Taylor's slender frame, her hands curled around the lapels of his suit jacket as his mouth claimed hers with the kind of hunger Ridge had once believed was reserved solely for Brooke. The soft gasp that escaped Ridge's throat shattered the hush, forcing the lovers apart, but the damage was done. Silken cashmere decorum dissolved into raw, undeniable betrayal. In that split second, Ridge saw every puzzle piece click into place. The odd late-night phone calls Eric had dismissed as foundation board business, Taylor's sudden insistence that Ridge give Brooke one more true chance. The way those two would exchange glances in staff meetings when no one else seemed to understand why the push to reunite Ridge and Brooke felt so urgent. Taylor's eyes widened with something dangerously close to terror, because Ridge was never meant to see this truth. Eric, for his part, grabbed the edge of the drafting table not from shame but from a flash-blinding burst of jealousy that his son now stood where he, Eric, wanted Taylor's focus fixed forever. Ridge's voice cracked when he found it. "You, too," and the question, raw and jagged, hung heavier than the chandelier overhead. Taylor, psychiatrist extraordinaire, defaulted to performance, summoning a fury so bright it almost singed the room. She whipped around, hurling accusations at Eric. "How dare you twist what we had into something seedy," as though Ridge had not just walked in on the visual proof of her duplicity, but Ridge knew her too well. The theatrics were a diversion. A frantic smokescreen to conceal how long her heart had drifted into Eric's orbit. Eric, always a maestro of charm, tried to don the patriarchal mask, telling Ridge that circumstances were far more complex than they looked, but the patriarch's bass vibrato quivered with possessive venom. The truth, uglier than any scandalous tabloid spread, was that Eric had orchestrated Ridge and Brooke's reconciliation campaign not out of altruistic wisdom, but because every moment Ridge spent tangled in Logan nostalgia was a minute Taylor remained unequivocally his. Yet the jolt of seeing Taylor comfort Ridge after rough days, of catching her soft eyes lingering on his son's profile, ignited an old, greedy spark inside Eric, the same spark that had once chased Donna's honey-sweet innocence and Quinn's dangerous fire. If he could not keep Taylor's gaze only on him, he would sabotage anything that threatened to steal it, including Ridge's tentative post-breakup healing. Now Ridge's outrage thundered through the very bones of the building. Years of turbulent romances had taught him pain, but nothing prepared him for the primal burn of paternal betrayal. He demanded answers. How long? How could they? And with every halting confession the timeline stretched back further, revealing stolen weekends masquerading as wellness retreats, co-parenting check-ins that turned into clandestine dinners under LA's velvet sky, secret Santa Monica rendezvous where Taylor's laughter echoed across the pier while Ridge drowned his own heartache in lonely Malibu evenings. Worse still, Eric admitted he had fueled whispers to Donna that he was exhausted, overworked, in need of space. Each seed of distance watered until Donna, trusting and loyal, retreated just enough to grant Eric emotional loopholes. Ridge pictured Donna's blue eyes widening as she learned the man who once fought Quinn's manipulations with declarations of monogamous devotion had quietly rewritten his vows in Taylor's arms. And his stomach clenched with sorrow for the woman who had believed his father's love was finally safe. As Ridge's rage swelled, Taylor pleaded that her love for Eric was complicated, born from shared battles, mutual loneliness after storms of the past, and the heady relief of being wanted for more than saving broken men. But Ridge, heart-pounding, ego-bleeding, could not disentangle the image of his father's hands on the woman he had so recently called his own. He stormed into the corridor where portraits of Forrester legends gazed down in gilded judgment, each ancestor's brush-stroked stare reminding him that family reputation was fragile glass. He envisioned media sharks already circling, sniffing for scandal. Forrester patriarch steals son's girlfriend. The press would feast, stock prices would wobble, and shareholders would question leadership stability. Ridge's mind flicked to Brooke. How would she react when she realized the earnest crusade to reclaim their union was tainted manipulation? How cruel that destiny had shoved her into hope just to serve Eric's jealousy. Meanwhile, inside the office, Taylor crumbled, no longer able to maintain the facade of indignant victim. She confessed tears of guilt each time she coached Ridge toward Brooke, the silent pang every time she answered Eric's calls in the dead of night, the dizzy intoxication of feeling cherished by a man who understood Forrester pressures without needing translation. Yet her confession did little to soothe Ridge's inner tempest. He returned, voice low and lethal, informing them that the betrayal was not merely personal, it threatened the integrity of the company, the trust of their children, the fragile peace between Logan and Forrester clans. Eric's nostrils flared, pride flinting against paternal love. He countered that Ridge, restless in romance, could not stake permanent claim on any heart, and that Taylor deserved steadfast adoration. Something Ridge's lifelong pendulum between Brooke and others had rarely afforded. The father-son confrontation spiraled, decades of unresolved competition spilling out, Eric castigating Ridge for perennial arrogance, Ridge condemning Eric's pattern of chasing novelty at the expense of loyal women. Taylor's attempts to mediate collapsed into sobs when Ridge spit out that her medical oath to heal had mutated into a prescription for deceit. Outside the door, Donna approached with a manila folder of invoice proofs, humming innocent, unsuspecting until Thomas and Steffi, summoned by flurries of alarmed text messages, intercepted her. They knew only that chaos brewed behind the oak door, but the tremor in their father's typed summons told them catastrophe awaited. Steffi's loyalty divided. She adored Taylor yet revered her grandfather. Thomas, haunted by his own history of manipulation, dreaded another scandal toppling family stability just as he clawed back trust. When Ridge flung the door wide, those he loved most absorbed the emotional blast wave. Donna's folder hit the carpet as she took in the tableau. Eric's tie askew, Taylor mascara streaked, Ridge's features contorted with anguish, realization slicing through her like broken glass. She whispered no. Not again, remembering Quinn's shattered vows, her own determination never to be the clueless victim twice. Eric reached for her, but she recoiled, tears already spilling. In an instant she became the beating heart of the collateral damage, her sob the soundtrack to Ridge's fury. The fallout detonated across the following hours. Legal teams scrambling to ensure non-disclosure agreements were airtight, PR strategists drafting contingency statements, security escorting tabloid reporters off the lot after word somehow leaked. Within the family, alliances tremored. Steffi cornered Taylor demanding brutal honesty. Thomas confronted Eric about generational patterns of selfish seduction. And Zend watched the empire he idolized threaten to implode over desire tangled in lineage. Ridge retreated to the cliff house, fists clenched on the balcony railing as Pacific waves crashed beneath nature's indifferent roar, mocking his private collapse. There, his mind ricocheted between primal hurt and strategic necessity. Could he forgive his father for a transgression that rewrote loyalties? Should he relinquish Taylor entirely and salvage dignity? How to shield company legacy when betrayal's fingerprints stained the CEO's name? Hours later, Brooke arrived summoned by Hope, who'd gleaned fragments from Steffi's panicked call. She found Ridge staring into the night, tears unshed, and for the first time in months she recognized not the proud designer, but the little boy inside, stunned that the hero called Dad could be the one wielding the dagger. Brooke's instinctual compassion warred with fresh betrayal. She realized her own emotions had been manipulated to clear the runway for Eric and Taylor's liaison. Yet in that recognition, she also felt old love for Ridge stir an understanding deeper than romance, shared history of Forrester upheavals, knowledge that when family fractures, only solidarity can suture the wound. She placed a hand on his shoulder, wordless, and Ridge finally allowed himself to sob, not for lost love of Taylor, but for the collapse of faith in blood ties. Meanwhile, Donna confronted Eric in the mansion they once filled with honeyed promises. Surrounded by memories, her bridal portrait, the lemon bars she baked during Sunday brunches, she listened as he confessed envy he couldn't strangle, yearning he mistook for second-chance vitality. She asked if she had ever been enough. His silence answered. Donna, voice steady despite quaking grief, removed her wedding ring, set it on the piano, and walked away, leaving Eric alone with the echo of ivory keys he was too shaken to play. Taylor, at her beach house, faced her own reckoning. Cameras from a boutique gossip site lurked beyond the garden wall, flashbulbs ready to spin the narrative. Therapist seduces patriarch. Her career, already fragile after past ethical entanglements, risked collapse, but worse was the self-recrimination flooding her chest. For all her degrees in human behavior, she had misdiagnosed her own heart, mistaking longing for love, escapism for salvation. The next morning, Ridge convened an emergency family summit in the Forrester showroom. Under the gaze of mannequins dressed in the brand's finest couture, he announced that effective immediately he would be stepping back from day-to-day operations to prevent further conflicts, delegating interim control to Steffi and Thomas jointly, an unprecedented move symbolizing his refusal to let ego pilot catastrophe. He stared directly at Eric as he declared that forgiveness might come eventually, but trust, once pulverized, would require more than time. It would demand proof of change and respect for boundaries sacred since Ridge was a boy. Eric's eyes brimmed. The patriarch was no longer marble solid, but a man whose own son now judged him wanting. Investors murmured about instability, yet some privately admired Ridge's backbone. Brooke stood behind the seating rows, proud and worried simultaneously. Proud that Ridge chose integrity over emotional impulse, worried that the scandal's aftershocks would strike staff livelihoods and brand reputation. In the days that followed, fashion bloggers dissected the implosion, customers fretted on social media, and designers from rival houses sniffed opportunity. But within the turmoil, slivers of growth emerged. Donna, though heartbroken, discovered a steely independence, channeling pain into leading the intimates division with a revived, competitive fire that surprised even herself. Taylor accepted a leave of absence, vowing intensive therapy not only to salvage her license, but to confront the void she kept trying to fill with dangerous love. Eric sought solitude, perhaps for the first time realizing that charisma without accountability was simply another form of vanity. Ridge, meanwhile, met with specialists to develop a wellness initiative for employees, ironically inspired by his need to rebuild trust in a workplace that now associated conference rooms with clandestine romance. And Brooke, though bruised, found a renewed purpose beyond chasing Ridge's ring. She volunteered as spokesperson in a campaign addressing emotional manipulation in relationships, using her own story as cautionary tale. Yet the central question remained unresolved, pulsing like a neon sign at the city's edge. Could a father and son rebuild a bond scorched by desire's reckless blaze? Could lovers disentangle themselves from the web of guilt and still find worth in their separate identities? Could a fashion empire that thrived on image survive the exposure of its most damning mirror? Seasoned viewers knew the bold and the beautiful never offered easy absolution. It promised only that in the crucible of heartbreak, characters either forged stronger steel or shattered irreparably. So audiences watched, breath held, as Ridge alone in Eric's office late one evening lifted a framed sketch of the first gown they ever designed together. His fingers traced the pencil lines, memories flooding of childhood afternoons spent under drafting tables while his father dreamed in fabric and thread. Tears smudged the glass. Yet he set the frame back carefully, a silent vow that though betrayal had scorched the foundation, the legacy could still stand reimagined, reinforced, but sturdy enough to carry the weight of truth. How, when, or if reconciliation would blossom remained a story for another episode, but one certainty glimmered. The Forrester clan, ever resilient, would spin even this darkest silk of scandal into a new pattern, one stitched with the painful wisdom that love unguided by honesty destroys. Yet love tempered by accountability might one day dress the world in something breathtaking once more.
Oh.